Imagine you're a British soldier in 1941. You're sitting in the middle of the North African desert, heat waves blurring the horizon. Suddenly, out of a literal wall of dust, tanks appear. Not just a few, a whole division. They weren't there 10 minutes ago. They aren't supposed to be there now. That was the magic trick of Erwin Rommel. The man was a ghost, a fox, and a nightmare all wrapped into one. Even the guys fighting him, the Americans and the Brits, couldn't help but say, "Damn, this guy is good." But here's the crazy part. The man who was Germany's greatest hero ended up being forced to commit suicide by his own government. Why? Because he became too big for the Nazis to handle. Grab a drink, get comfortable. We're going deep into the life of the Desert Fox. Believe it or not, Rommel wasn't some war-hungry kid. Born in 1891 in Heidenheim, he was actually a bit of a nerd. He wanted to be an engineer. He liked how things worked, engines, gears, math. But his dad, a tough-as-nails teacher, basically told him, "Son, you're going into the army or you're going nowhere." So in 1910, Rommel joins the infantry. He wasn't a big, hulking guy. He was lean, quiet, and incredibly disciplined. When World War I kicks off, Rommel gets his first taste of the meat grinder. But instead of just sitting in a trench, he starts doing something nobody else was doing. He starts moving. World War I was mostly guys baying for 3 inches of mud. But Rommel, he went to the mountains of Italy. In the Battle of Caporetto, Rommel took a handful of men and captured an entire mountain range. He didn't do it by out-shooting them. He did it by out-climbing them. He'd sneak behind enemy lines, cut their phone wires, and capture thousands of Italians who thought they were surrounded by a whole army. He won the Pour le Mérite, the Blue Max. That's like the Medal of Honor on steroids. He became a legend before he was 30. After World War I, Germany was a mess, but Rommel stayed in the army. He spent his time teaching and writing. He wrote a book called Infantry Attacks. It wasn't some boring manual. It was like an action movie script. Guess who read it? Adolf Hitler. Hitler loved it. He saw Rommel as the new German man, tough, smart, and not part of the old, snobby, aristocratic class. When Hitler took power, he put Rommel in charge of his personal security. Rommel wasn't a politician, he was a soldier. He saw Hitler as a guy who was finally giving the army the respect it deserved. That was his first big mistake. 1940, the invasion of France. Rommel gets command of the 7th Panzer Division. Now, Rommel had never commanded tanks before, but remember, he's an engineer at heart. He gets it. Tanks means speed. He drives his tanks so fast and so far into enemy lines that his own bosses lose track of him. They started calling it the Ghost Division. He'd show up in a French village and the French soldiers would be eating lunch, having no idea the Germans were even in the country yet. He smashed through France in weeks. But the legend, the Desert Fox stuff, starts in 1941. The Italians are getting crushed in North Africa by the British. Hitler sends Rommel with a small force, the Afrika Korps. The desert is a hellscape. It's 120 degrees during the day and freezing at night. There are no roads, just sand and flies. Rommel arrives and is told Rommel was the king of the fake-out. He didn't have enough tanks, so what did he do? He had his engineers build fake tanks out of wood and canvas and put them on Volkswagen chassis. From the air, the British pilots thought he had 1,000 tanks. He'd drive them in circles to create massive dust clouds. The British would freak out and retreat from a massive force that was basically just 3 guys and some plywood. Here's why Rommel is different from other German generals. The Desert War was cleaner. There were no cities to burn, no civilians to terrorize. It was just 2 armies in a vast sandbox. Rommel famously ignored the commando order, an order from Hitler to execute British special forces. Rommel burned the order. He treated his prisoners of war with respect. He shared his water with them. The British General Auchlick even had to tell his troops, "Stop talking about Rommel like he's a magician. He's just a guy." But the respect was mutual. The high point? the Siege of Tobruk. It was a vital port. He took it in a lightning strike. When he did, he was promoted to field marshal. He was 50 years old, the youngest field marshal in German history. At this point, he's a rock star. In Germany, he's the face of the war. In the Allied world, he's the boogeyman mothers tell their kids about. But the desert is a cruel mistress. Rommel's supply lines were thousands of miles long. The British had the Royal Navy sinking his fuel ships. Rommel was literally running out of gas. Then comes Bernard "Manty" Montgomery. Manty was the opposite of Rommel. He wasn't flashy, he was slow, methodical, and had a massive amount of tanks and planes. At the Battle of El Alamein, Rommel's luck ran out. He begged Hitler for a retreat to save his men. Hitler's response? Victory or death. Rommel realized then that his leader was a madman who didn't care about the soldiers. Rommel defied Hitler. He retreated anyway. He saved as many men as he could, but the Afrika Korps was broken. He flew back to Germany, sick, tired, and disillusioned. He tried to tell Hitler the truth. We can't win this war. Hitler didn't want to hear it. He sent Rommel to France to build the Atlantic Wall. Rommel arrives in France and looks at the defenses. He says, "This is a joke." He spends months planting millions of mines, building concrete bunkers, and putting Rommel's aspirin, giant wooden spikes, on the beaches to stop gliders. He knew that if the Allies landed, the war was over. He said the first 24 hours will be the longest day. June 6, 1944, the day of days. And where was the Desert Fox? He was at home. It was his wife Lucy's birthday, and the weather forecast said it was too stormy for an invasion. He got the phone call while he was at home. The Allies were on the beaches. He raced back, but by the time he got there, the wall had cracked. By July 1944, Rommel had enough. He was talking to other officers who wanted to kill Hitler. Did Rommel want to kill him? Probably not. He wanted to arrest him and put him on trial, but he knew the war had to end. Then, on July 17th, a British plane strafed Rommel's car. He was nearly killed. His skull was fractured in 3 places. While he was in the hospital, the famous July 20th plot happened. A bomb went off in Hitler's bunker. Hitler survived, and he started looking for who to blame. Rommel's name came up in the interrogations. Hitler couldn't put Rommel on trial. The public would revolt. Their hero, a traitor? Impossible. So on October 14, 1944, 2 generals showed up at Rommel's house. They told him, "You have 2 choices. You can go to Berlin, face a trial, and your family will be sent to a concentration camp. Or you can take this vial of cyanide right now, we'll give you a state funeral, and your family will be safe." Rommel chose the vial. He got into a car, drove a few miles away, and took the poison. He died in minutes. The Nazi government lied. They told the world he died of his previous head injuries. They gave him a massive hero's funeral with swastikas everywhere. It was the ultimate insult. So what do we do with a guy like Rommel? He wasn't a monster like Himmler or Goebbels. He was a soldier who fought for a monstrous regime, but tried to keep his hands clean. He was a genius who was eventually destroyed by the very system he helped build. In America, we still study him, not because we like what he fought for, but because we respect the skill. He was the Desert Fox, a man caught in the middle of the greatest evil the world has ever seen.